Hey everyone, this is Hurricane Hal, lead scientist with CMC Catastrophe and National Claims, on location in Delcombe, Louisiana, with Hurricane Delta moving in. An update, midday update here on Friday. Maximum sustained winds are now 115 miles an hour, moving to the north at 13 miles an hour. As of 10 a.m., Delta was centered about 130 miles south-southwest of Cameron, Louisiana. I'm in Delcombe, Louisiana, near Vermilion Bay, where we're expecting the largest storm surge from Hurricane Delta. 7 to 11 feet of storm surge predicted above normally dry ground. I want to give you a little recap of the storm and go from west to east. This storm is larger than Hurricane Laura. So to set the stage, this is the fourth landfalling hurricane along the Gulf Coast this hurricane season. We had Hannah in South Texas in July. We had Laura, a Category 4 hurricane landfall in southwest Louisiana in August. We had Sally in South Alabama and the Florida Panhandle in September. And now here we have Hurricane Delta, right now a Category 3 hurricane, will probably make landfall as a Cat 2 later this afternoon or this evening, again in southwest Louisiana. Something a little bit rare is that we have two landfalling hurricanes almost in exactly the same location, twice in the same hurricane season. It looks like Delta will make landfall east of Cameron, and this is pretty much the landfall location for Laura back in August. This reminds me of 2004 when Hurricanes Francis and Jean both made landfall just north of Palm Beach and south of Jupiter, Florida. So it's pretty rare to have back-to-back storms, in this case, just 6 weeks apart. Let's go from west to east across the impact zone. Let's start with my hometown of Galveston and what they're looking at there. A few people ask me, am I imagining it, or is this the worst of the three storms we've had? Upper Texas coast was affected by Laura in August, and then just last month in September, Tropical Storm Beta produced a lot of flooding along the upper Texas coast. This storm, Delta, is actually producing the strongest winds of the three along the upper Texas coast. As of last hour, sustained winds in Galveston were from the north at 38 with gusts to 49. That's getting close to sustained tropical storm force winds. That's strong enough to bring down some weak trees, to bring down some tree limbs and cause isolated power outages. We do not expect really extensive wind damage or structural damage from Hurricane Delta in the Houston-Galveston corridor, but the winds are the strongest of the three because even though it's taking a similar track that Laura took in August, the wind field to the west of the center of circulation is more extensive than Laura was. What about coastal flooding along the upper Texas coast? The good news with that is that tide, the normal astronomical tide, would be falling this afternoon in Galveston. So in general, the water levels got to between 3 and 3.5 feet in downtown Galveston, also along Bolivar Peninsula. And I think they'll stay there this afternoon because the tides would be falling, but instead the water level is pretty much staying steady because the surge is coming in, but the tides are falling. I think we'll see less flooding downtown Galveston and Bolivar Peninsula than we did with Laura or Beta as well. So that's really good news for our friends in the upper Texas coast. What about southwest Louisiana? What are we looking at here for landfall? Well, the good thing is that we have increasing wind shear or crosswinds across Hurricane Delta. And the second piece of good news is that the water temperatures in the northern Gulf Coast have been running cooler than normal for early October because we've already had two cold front passages. And that's good because that should weaken Delta, and I think it'll make landfall probably as a Category 2 hurricane here along the Louisiana coast. What about storm surge in Louisiana? Well, there's a couple things that we look at. For one, I co-published a paper in 2014 that found that storm surge heights correlate best with the pre-landfall wind speed and the pre-landfall size. So what does that mean? Well, looking right now, even though Delta is weakening and may make landfall maybe as a Category 2 hurricane, offshore it's a Category 3. So that gives it ability to push a little more storm surge than some people may expect. What about the size of this storm? Fortunately, Delta is smaller in size than Hurricane Laura was. So the extent of hurricane force winds go out 35 nautical miles, but back in Laura they went out 50 nautical miles. And the tropical storm force winds go out 140 nautical miles in Delta. They went out 180 in Laura. So the wind fields in Laura were more extensive, and that enabled Laura to push more storm surge. Also, Laura was moving faster, and that enabled, basically slower storms generally push more water. So Laura was more intense and larger, that enabled it to push more surge, but then Delta's moving slower, and that gives it a check mark for Delta. So overall, when you bring all of these ingredients into the mix, I think we'll see that Laura's storm surge was a little bit higher than Delta's, for sure in the high impact zone out by Grand Chenier and Cameron. But even here in Vermilion Bay, where we're expecting the biggest storm surge from Delta, I think that that Laura surge will end up being maybe 2 to 3 feet higher. So I don't know if you can see my setting here. I'm on a wharf in Delcombe, Louisiana. There's a shrimp boat over here, and you can see some planks of the wharf are missing because of Hurricane Laura. So Laura put in a lot of storm surge here, 4 to 5 feet above normally dry ground. So I'm looking south here towards Vermilion Bay. Our friends down in Sippermore Point in Vermilion Bay received about 6 to 7 feet of water in Hurricane Laura above dry ground. I think it'll be a little bit lower this time. So I think in general in this area, storm surge will be slightly lower than it was in Laura. I installed this community flood monitoring system here, and you can see the pole. Now when I installed this yesterday evening, the water level was at 6 inches, and that was about 10 p.m. and we can zoom in here and get an idea of where it's at now. So if you look closely with me, we'll take this observation. It's around 22 inches. So it came up about 16 inches since 10 o'clock last night. Some of that was from normal astronomical tides, but the tide should have been falling here since about 10 a.m. and instead they're coming up. So water level is rising, and we'll get to the wharf level and we'll inundate some of the area here in the parking lot. I want to walk you over here. We have a shrimp boat, and the boat captains often stay here during these storms. They're adjusting the ropes. They're keeping an eye on their boats as well and their equipment. Here we have a restaurant bar, and check this out. There's a really good high water mark here from Hurricane Laura. So Laura put about 4 to 5 feet of salt water above normally dry ground, and you can see that there is a high water mark. You see the line here on the wall? That measures 33 inches above ground level. That's the water line there on the wall from Hurricane Laura 6 weeks ago here in Delcombe, Louisiana, and now we have another flood. I really think that Delta's surge will be a little bit lower than Laura's was, but still it'll be a second flood and a second impact in just 6 weeks. Yesterday I was driving around here in southwest Louisiana, and what really hit me were all the blue tarps on the roofs out by Lake Charles. And we have some news crews here joining us today. The other thing that hit me were there were a lot of debris piles yesterday. A lot of roof damage, a lot of limbs and trees that were down. There are a lot of debris piles in southwest Louisiana, and that's not good news with Category 1 and 2 hurricane winds coming into the area. So that is a big concern. Please keep interacting. I'm Dr. Hal Needham. I'm lead scientist with CNC Catastrophe and National Claims. We like to get out here before the storm to set up equipment and do accurate forecasting. Then we like to stay during the storm to observe what's happening and take observation. That helps us understand the science better. It also helps get people back on their feet after the storm. We can get public assistance grants and things like that after the storm, help with significant damage assessments, and also help people push their flood and insurance claims from wind and flooding through as well, and help them get back on their feet. And then lastly, afterwards, we really like to stay in these communities, understand what they need, and really try to meet those needs both during and after the storm. Well, this is Dr. Hal Needham. I hope everyone stays safe. Please keep interacting with me on social media. I'm based in Galveston, Texas, but I'm in Delcombe, Louisiana today, tracking Hurricane Delta. Again, the last thing I wanted to share for folks all along the coast, the storm is moving through fairly quickly, and by this evening actually, in the Houston-Galveston area, it'll move through. The winds will drop off quite quickly once we get to this evening. The worst of the winds, I think, for, say, Galveston will be mid-afternoon. I think they could be sustained in the 40s with gusts in the 50s. As we get north of High Island, I think we'll see even stronger winds than that. Here in Louisiana, I think we'll see a Cat 2 hurricane landfall, and the strongest winds will be this evening and later tonight. But after midnight, I think a lot of this will start clearing out. This weekend actually looks quite sunny, and parts of Texas, south and central Texas, could actually see record high temperatures this weekend. So a lot of sunshine in store for us if we can just make it through this afternoon and evening here along the Texas and Louisiana coast. This is Hurricane Hal signing off from Delcombe, Louisiana. Stay safe, everybody.